Before we start, I just want to clarify that all the operators I rank on this tier list come from my own personal opinion. I am in no way the best player in the game, and I'm only creating this for fun and to pass the time. This tier list will also only be focused on organized 5v5 play, and has no contextual relation to ranked or casual. Also, this was all done unscripted, so mind my stutters, and I'm definitely going to mispronounce things as well. So let's start with the obvious operators. We have Jaeger here. Now, Jaeger definitely belongs in S tier, because all around he's a solid operator and has been since the game came out. Before Mozzie was released, he had the only assault rifle, which packs a huge punch. It does a lot of damage. It will 3-shot most operators in the entire game, as long as they're not 3 armor, which is pretty rare for attackers nowadays. He has a very strong gadget that's easy to utilize, and honestly it's pretty quick to place down either. Doesn't require much setup. All you have to do is walk to the choke points where you think throwables are going to be thrown in from, and you've already impacted the map at that point. Because he's 3 speed, he also serves as a good roamer as well. Yeah, nothing else much to say. Strong operator. No surprise, Mira belongs in S tier as well. Now, it should be obvious at this stage of the game. She's been out for 2 years now, but the reason she's S tier and probably still one of the best operators in the entire game for both attackers and defense is simply because of her gadget. That the one-way mirror is absolutely fucking stupid, and it requires a lot of effort from the attacking team to get around. Sometimes it's even impossible if they don't bring the correct operators or they don't have the correct counter strap to a mirror setup. Now, this operator is completely dumb in the sense that her existence allows her to create new certain setups that would otherwise not be possible. And because players standing behind mirrors can react in real time to attackers who are detected through this mirror, it just makes the attacker's life miserable at times. What else? She's only 1 speed, but that doesn't really matter for her since she's an operator that will pretty much spend 95% of each round on the site. And her gun is probably the fastest firing SMG off the top of my head in the game. Even though it does nearly no damage, all you need is 1 bullet to the head to kill someone, and it's not like the gun is uncontrollable like Ella's Scorpion, which we'll talk about later, is a piece of shit. But yeah, nothing else much to say. Next up we have Echo. Now, in the current meta of Siege right now for defense, we're basically in an intel based meta, which means that all of the intel based operators in the game right now are super strong, and just having the most intelligence possible on defense is a necessity to win most of the rounds these days. So you could make an argument that Echo and even Maestro belong here because, one, both these operators have ACOGs despite being only 1 speeds, but Maestro has the only LMG on defense and what I consider to be the best gun on defense, period. It's really easy to control and such, but we'll talk about him later. But the reason why I think Echo nudges it out at the top is simply because his gadget is harder to detect without an IQ. If the enemy team doesn't have an IQ, spotting an Echo drone will pretty much be impossible. It will never get detected 9 times out of 10. What else? His drones are also mobile after prep phase, unlike Maestro, who needs to place down his cameras before the round starts. Echo's drones can be moved mid-round, and also Echo's drones also serve as plant denial, which is obviously very important in the only game mode that matters, bomb. Yeah, nothing else much to say. A passive Echo player that knows what he's doing is an absolute fucking terror in organized play. Now, it should be no surprise, but in an intel-based meta, we obviously need some trap operators, and who better than Hong Kong man himself, Legion. Now, Legion is absolutely fucking stupid and has been since he's released. This operator can, in one round, place down 7 fucking traps. Now, think of that as 7 barbed wires. That's absolutely ridiculous. Every time an attacker steps on one of his traps, that's intel you've gathered, and that's a position of an attacker that you now know and can relay to your team. Also, the traps are really fucking annoying when triggered by the attackers. It blurs their vision and shit, and they can't sprint. Yeah, just really annoying. He's 2 speed and 2 armor, which is fine. His gun actually fires really, really fast, even though it doesn't do too much damage. I think it only does 28 damage. Honestly, it doesn't even matter. His gadget alone is just ridiculous. You just gotta think of it as having a shit ton of barbed wire. Also, his traps are invisible, so good luck detecting them if you don't have an IQ. Now, this is where it starts to get a little bit iffy. You could make arguments for every single one of these operators I'm about to place next, which is fine. This is still, once again, my own opinion. But next up, we have Maestro. Now, obviously, as I said before, we're an intel-based meta, so more information the better. And Maestro, it should be obvious by now, but the reason why he's one of the best operators in the game is because he has the best defense weapon, has an ACOG, and has 2 bulletproof cameras that can shoot lasers and destroy certain gadgets, but they can also see through smoke. And also, you absolutely need to bring some sort of counter to his gadget. If you don't have any sort of explosive or any sort of disruption EMP effect like a Twitch drone or a Thatcher EMP, then his fucking cameras is going to be spotting you non-stop. Honestly, his existence in the game is probably what killed the original Glaz Ying get the fucking diffuser down meta, where you just smoke the entire site and then plant the diffuser as quick as possible and then play around that. Nothing too much else to say. He would honestly be S tier if it weren't for the fact that his his cameras are now punishable by EMP effects. Before that, it would definitely be up here, but now that you can destroy them with a simple Twitch drone or a Thatcher EMP, he's not as strong as he once was. Also, they nerfed his fucking LMG hipfire, I missed that. Next up, we have Mozzie. Now, Mozzie, once again, is another intel operator, but he's a special case in that he also serves as counter intel, which is just as important as gathering information. Obviously, he's the newest operator to the competitive scene, so this one is probably the biggest wild card out of all the operators, and I have no idea how he's going to affect the meta, but I do have a feeling that he will be pretty strong since his gadget effectively has 0 counterplay at the moment. I mean, yeah, you can destroy his pests with EMP nades, but why would you want to be doing that as Thatcher when you have more important things to be doing, such as helping the hard breacher breach? Yeah, the annoying thing about Mozzie is that even if he doesn't hack your drone, he can simply place down his gadget at certain spots, and then you just can't even drive your drone through there anyway, because what are you going to do? If you drive it through, he hacks your drone, and then he gets a free camera for his team. And honestly, just the fact alone that his gadget counters all the attacker's drones, which is basically your lifeline as an attacker and the only way you have of gathering intel, it's just ridiculous, because you're taking away the ability for the attackers to play the game, essentially, since, you know, we are playing Siege. It is a tactical shooter at times, and intel is one of the main selling points. Nothing too much else to say. He could be B tier, I honestly don't know, but he has solid weaponry, he has a secondary shotgun, and he has C4. Yeah, don't know. Next up, we have Valkyrie. No surprise, she is, in my opinion, an A tier operator, and she was the very first intel-based operator in the game, if you don't count Capcan from vanilla, but he was dog shit back then, so like who fucking cares? As such, she's pretty basic when you think about it. Her gadget is just 3 extra cameras, but the difference is her cameras are smaller than every other Intel gadget in the game, and they can be placed anywhere essentially, even outside the map, which is probably one of her strongest selling points. A Valkyrie and Consulate is fucking deadly. I shouldn't have to tell anyone that. Her weaponry does kind of lack in a bit. Like, the MPX has historically never really been a top tier gun. It is a laser and it is accurate and it has decent fire rate, but it is known for being a pea shooter, so if you don't hit those headshots, you ain't killing shit. And the Deagle, on the other hand, it does make larger holes than any other pistol in the game, which allows her to make spots for her cameras, but hasn't really been a good sidearm. It usually gets overshadowed by every other sidearm in the game, but we'll see, since the next patch, Phantom Sight, does allow you to attach a muzzle brake now, so it might be good. I really haven't tried enough of it on the test server, but we'll see. Next up, we definitely need to round off the A tier list with an entry denial operator. Now, you could make an argument for either Kaid or Bandit, but I'm going to go with Kaid simply because of the fact that he can electrify hatches, whereas Bandit cannot. Even though Bandit arguably has a superior gun compared to Kaid's slug shotgun and AR, and the fact that Bandit is 3-speed, which is always an advantage. Just being able to reinforce hatches with an electricity effect just forces the attacker's hand, in the sense that they now have to spend that extra effort and extra operator pick to simply get rid of a Kaid charge if the hatch reinforced is an important one, say on bank basement. Yeah, and because you force the attackers to pick a Thatcher in most cases, you're taking away the enemy's ability to like potentially grab a different operator that may help them otherwise. So not much else to say. I think he's pretty strong, but you could make an argument for him being in B tier. He's definitely not dog shit, that's for sure. Next up we have Mute. Now Mute, in my opinion, belongs at the top of B tier simply because he's the most effective counter intel operator in the entire game for defense. Him alone, if you're playing certain bomb sites, like for example on the second floor of Oregon in Kids and Master, by placing your mute charges in certain spots, you can effectively lock down every single drone from ever trying to spot you coming in from the building. Combine him with Mozzie, on the other hand, and it suddenly becomes a game of what can the attackers do with no fucking eyes. On top of that, he does have certain good uses in very, very situational situations, to say the least. A good example is, once again, on Oregon, on Laundry Basement. You can use one mute charge to mute the hatch right above Laundry, which is obviously the most important hatch for that bomb site. If that hatch is closed, it makes it extremely hard for the attackers. If it's open, it makes it extremely hard for the defenders. So, yeah. Also, his weaponry is pretty good. Now, no surprise, Smoke is historically been one of the strongest denial operators in the game. He was the only denial operator before we had such characters such as Echo, Legion, and Maestro, but he was the OG denial boy. Not too much to say on his weaponry. It's the exact same as Mute's. It's pretty strong. Shotgun primary, that's really, really good and packs a punch. Good SMG-11 secondary and has barbed wire. Now, his gadget's interesting in that it is really, really strong for pressuring attackers when they're trying to make a bomb plant, or in the final stages of a round when they're trying to push through certain sites. He's super strong in those situations. But outside of that, he's not really that strong, to be honest. Like, if you force a Smoke to use his gadget early, he becomes kind of useless as the you know, as an anchor operator, because he is an anchor after all. And if he doesn't have any more smokes when attackers finally make a objective play, then it just becomes another fragging operator. What else? Yeah, unlike Lesion, who's effective throughout the entire round if he stays alive, Smoke needs to be alive in the final, let's say 30 seconds for him to be super effective. And nowadays in the average competitive rounds are decided like maybe halfway through a round, maybe at like the 1 minute 30, 1 minute mark. Obviously rounds that go the whole 3 minutes do still occur, but not as frequent as they once was when passive play was a thing. A lot of players play aggressive now, even on defense. Next up we have Bandit. Not too much to say. He's basically the original vanilla version of an entry denial operator. Obviously with his battery charges that can be placed up to 4 walls. The reason why he's in B tier and not in A tier is really simple. I just think Kaid's a more flexible option compared to Bandit. Obviously you won't want to bring a Kaid every single time. You really only want to bring a Kaid when there's essential hatches to be placed. So you could make that argument and bring Kaid down to B tier and make Bandit an A tier. But I don't even think Bandit's that strong of an operator to be brought in every single round in the entire game. So he is, however, a 3-speed, so unlike Kaid, he can double as a lurker, an effective one to say the least. He can also Bandit trick, which, whilst still a powerful mechanic in the game, not as strong as it once used to be, simply because attackers have more options now to deal with it. So there's vertical play, they could even bring a Maverick and potentially fuck you over. Yeah, that's all I have to say. Next up we have Pulse. Pretty obvious why he's in B tier. He's really strong in vertical play for defense. Simply being able to spot players above or below you is really useful in itself, and relaying that information to your teammates. But if you were to play from bottom to up, then you could easily get some easy C4 kills. The most obvious example is in Clubhouse when you're playing in ammunition. Players trying to open up the hatch, if there's no Hibana, can simply be killed because it's such a small room and the whole floorboard is wood basically. So just throwing a C4 up there's a good chance you're going to get a kill, and even if you don't get a kill, you've at least put that threat of a pulse on the enemy team onto them. Other than that though, he's not actually that useful. I mean, his heartbeat sensor does bring intelligence to the field and he can spot players sometimes, but you know, you have all these other options for intel gathering, so you really only bring Pulse for the vertical play. But I will say this though, he is super strong once again in the final stages of a round where the attackers need to get the diffuser down, and because they're stuck there for 7 seconds, a Pulse can easily see someone not moving and assume that they're planting, and just throw an easy C4 and they're dead. Alright, now here's where things get really interesting. We're starting to get to the bottom barrel of operators that will probably rarely see competitive play, or if they do, then they're really only situationally useful. First up, let's get Doc in here. Now, not much else to say. He's a really basic operator. He has a stim pack that can heal other players or revive them from a distance. He has really good weaponry on defense. He has an MP5, which is a laser beam. It nearly has no recoil, with an ACOG to say the least. So obviously he's one of Siege's best spawn peekers, but you don't really see that in organized play because it is quite risky. Yep, not too much else to say. Because he doesn't really bring any utility besides just healing players to get injured, he's not actually that useful. Like, you could replace him easily with an Echo or a Maestro who will do the exact same job Doc can do, only with the exception that they bring intel gadgets to their team that anyone can use. So Next, I'm going to put Clash here. Now, Clash is a very gimmicky operator on defense in that all she does is gather intel once again by just looking at you. The difference is though, is that Clash is easily countered by a couple of operators that get played a lot right now. Those two being Zofia and Capitao. Obviously, Zofia's concussive nades force Clash's shield animation to expose her leg, which just makes it an easy kill if the Zofia is working with a teammate. Or in the case of Capitao, he just shoots a fireball at you, and because you're already super slow, the fireball will easily, if not kill you, at least bring you down to lethal range. Taser's shield is quite strong and annoying, but obviously there are ways to get around it, and if you're bringing a Clash, then you're essentially not... That's like another ACOG gun that you're probably not bringing, or another operator with a potentially more useful utility that you're not bringing. She isn't bad, don't get me wrong, just compared to other operators, she gets overshadowed and she is quite gimmicky. I should probably put Castle and backtrack a little bit in front of Doc and Clash, simply because while Castle is not universally a useful operator and he doesn't even have strong weaponry to balance that out, he is obviously quite useful in certain setups, and some bomb sites just require him in order to be played. A good example is second floor on Bank, where you have the 4 windows in office that look out into the main lobby. Yeah, by having castle walls there, it just closes off angles that attackers can normally otherwise get from looking outside of the building where they're shooting in from relative safety. So other than that, it's not very useful. He obviously gets countered by every single soft breaching operator in the game. This includes Ash, Zofia, Sledge, Buck, who has frag grenades, to say the least, and yeah. Next, I'm going to put Frost here. Now, I don't have a high opinion of Frost personally. I think she is probably one of the worst operators in the entire game, but I can't argue that she is effective against more skilled players, to say the least, that would otherwise overlook her. She has a reputation for being very effective at high elo in ranked, which translates into competitive, because most players in competitive would never expect a Frost, especially if they don't manage to scout her out during prep phase. So one random Frost trap could mean one person getting downed and being out of the game effectively. That being said, her traps are very easy to destroy, and especially if they're placed underneath windows, a person vaulting in could easily pre-fire downwards as they're jumping in to destroy it. And I know that in the next Phantom Sight patch, they're actually nerfing her, and the traps will only need 2 shots to be destroyed now. So don't know why they're doing that. I don't even think she's that great. Next up we have Vigil. Now, Vigil is interesting in that he doesn't actually bring any utility to his team, which at first glance you'd think, well, that's kind of shit. Isn't he just like another Caveira? But the difference is that his selfish gadget, which wipes his image from all drones, is more useful than Cav's interrogation, because when are you ever going to get an interrogation off in one round? Whereas compared to Vigil, the actual gadget itself will maybe get you 1 or 2 kills. And if you can get those 1 or 2 picks as a Vigil, then you can justify picking him in Operator Select. That being said, if you do absolutely nothing on this character, then you've essentially wasted a pick for your team, since they could have used that pick otherwise for at least some sort of utility. Like even a Frost would be better than a Vigil who's died instantly and did 0 damage. Not too much else to say, to be honest. Next up we have Alibi. Now, Alibi is interesting in that I do think she has the potential to be a really strong operator. There's just a couple of things keeping her from being really good. The first is obviously that her clones don't actually match her actual gun and uniform. So because of that, a well-droned clone or well-droned alibi will immediately shut down any sort of player error that could potentially happen. Conversely, as alibi, in order for your clones to be effective, you are relying on players to jump and react to your clones because they either haven't scouted it or they're just really jumpy and shoot everything that they see. Which is a thing in this game, it does happen, but once again, you're relying on player error, so once you do that, then you're already a flawed character by design. Also, every operator above her in this tier list does bring some form of utility that's at the very least more useful than hers. You could make an argument that she's probably slightly better than Vigil, but I do think Vigil's slightly stronger, just simply because he can be invisible to drones, which is, you know, drones is intel in this game and intel is king. Next up we have Kapkan. Now, I don't think, once again, Kapkan is that shit of an operator. The only problem is that his traps are much more binary compared to everyone else that has traps in this game, in that they can only be placed in doorways. So once again, you're relying on doorways in order to trigger your traps, which, you know, it does happen sometimes, but it mainly only happens to teams that play far too fast or far too aggressively and don't drone. So if a team does drone very well, then the chances of them hitting a trap are nil or non-existent. Also, just the fact alone that your traps must be placed at doorways makes them very binary and therefore easier to counter, compared to, let's say, Legion, who can place the traps anywhere he wants as long as there's a flat surface, even on windows. Next up we have Ela. Now, it should be no surprise why she's this low. As a trap operator, she has far better counterparts nowadays. Obviously, Legion is the strongest, so if you can't beat Legion, then you're probably not as good as A-tier operators. Her gun is a shadow of its former self. The SMG Scorpion is one of the most uncontrollable guns this game has ever seen. The amount of horizontal and vertical recoil in it makes it just impossible for anyone to control, really. So the gun's not even that useful past 7 or 8 meters. She does have one very good use though, and that is playing around corners where attackers would have no choice but to peek in from. In those cases, she can just use her shotgun and traps to her advantage and, yeah, play the CQC game where she's arguably her strongest now. But if you're playing the CQC game, you're not really flexible enough of a character to be taking gunfights at mid to long range, which is honestly where not long range, but most of the gunfights in this game do take place in that mid to close range. And if you can't do mid range, then you're not a good operator, period. Last but not least in C tier, Rook. Now, Rook, while his gadget is useful in that it does reduce damage that you take, the fact of the matter is that in most organized games, a majority of the kills that happen are going to be headshots, and in those situations having Rook armor does absolutely nothing for you. Obviously you can play around that to kind of abuse it, for example, like hiding your headshot hitbox, just peeking really fast and not giving enemies time to react to aim at your head, for example. But yeah, like how many times is that going to happen per round, really? You'd rather bring someone else that actually has useful utility to the team, whether that be traps or intel gathering or denial, etc. His one saving grace that's saving him from being worse than he already is the MP5 and ACOG. It is, once again, a strong gun, one of the strongest defense guns, and same with Doc. If he didn't have that weapon, then it would definitely be in D tier, that's for sure. Also, comparing him to Doc. Doc is just simply better because he has the heal stim. Because you will run into those situations where people do get tagged and they survive, and in those cases you'd rather have a Doc compared to a Rook. Alright, Cav. I don't really have to explain this in too much detail, but essentially the reason why she's not good is the same reason why Vigil isn't that great either, is because she doesn't have any utility that she brings to her team. With one exception, and that's interrogation. Her real gadgets are actually her silent step and her pistol. The pistol in itself is a decent gun. It used to be stupidly overpowered, doing 99 damage at close range. The only problem is that she doesn't really bring anything to the table. Like, yeah, sure, both her gadgets, the pistol and silent step, do help her roam. The problem is that you could do her job just as effectively with any other operator in the game that's 3-speed, with certain exceptions of course. And in an actual organized 5v5 game, you'd never get an interrogation off anyway, because attackers rarely push into sites solo, and just trying to get an interrogation off around 2 players, even if one is down, is just nearly impossible, because you'll be called out, your position will be revealed, at best you'll get a kill and run away, and you won't even get the interrogation off. And if players are isolated, then they're usually in spots where they can't be reached anyway. So even if you do down them, you can't even reach them to get an interrogation. A good example is players on roofs with skylights, or on bank on second floor. We have a common spot on the windows next to office that usually get played by repelled players. I mean, usually the counter strat to that is to just have a defender run out and potentially sacrifice himself. But why would you want to have a Cav do that? You could easily bring a Jaeger who has utility to the team, and after he's done placing his utility, he's essentially an expendable character. At the end of the day, she's just not a good operator, because good teamwork can essentially counter her playstyle. Alright, Warden. Now, I personally don't think this character is any good, but we'll just have to wait and see. Obviously, as the newest defender, he won't be in any sort of competitive games for about 3 months, but I can still give my opinion, so who gives a shit. This character is just far too situational to be anywhere near decent, and the way that he was designed and made is got a couple of flaws or negative traits about it that just make him just not a good safe pick for every round. Let's start off with the obvious ones. He's at 1-speed, so he's already at a disadvantage compared to other characters. And as a 1-speed, he doesn't have any ACOGs on any of his weaponry, which is a big downside for a character that doesn't really have that strong of a gadget. Like, if you compare him to Mira, Mira has the mirrors, which are extremely strong. They're pretty much always useful in every map that has at least 1 or 2 bomb sites that could utilize a mirror really well. That being said, I can see him being good in strats where smokes are used quite often. The only problem is that doesn't really happen too often anymore. Like, when do you ever see smoke executes successfully even getting run or even attempted? Because that's what you're mainly going to be using this guy for, right? It's so you can see through smoke and just look at players who think that they're using the smoke as cover from lack of vision. Other than that, I can see Warden being useful against Ying, but honestly, Ying isn't even that good anyway, because 1, they just reworked her, she can't really spam her Ying Candelas anymore, and 2, you've already got an operator there that or an operator in the game that already somewhat counters her in that you can place Jaeger charges correctly and you can make it fairly difficult for a Ying to be effective. Yeah, I don't really have anything else to say. His gadgets, the glasses are just too situational. And another thing, his glasses are inconsistent with every other operator in the game that has a toggleable gadget. Like, for example, the new attacker Knock can turn her what is it? Whatever the fuck it's called. It makes her invisible to drones and silent. She can toggle that on and off whenever she wants, as long as she has 25% charge. And they just changed Vigil and Cav to have the same effect on their gadgets too, but why can't Warden do that? I'm guessing it's because they don't want him to be too overpowered, so that he can just turn his gadget on and off and keep seeing through smoke and repositioning. But as it stands, I don't think he's anywhere near good. Like, he might even be near the bottom of the barrel. It could be C tier, maybe. It could be decent, but he's definitely nowhere near the top dogs. That's for sure. Last but not least, Tachanka. Clearly the best defender in the entire game ever since he came out. He has a LMG that can be placed on the ground and it only takes 2 shots to kill anyone. Followed by a 180 degree arc in which he can cover. I'm just kidding. Fuck this character. He's dog shit. Don't play him.